Howdy, I've got another great story for you today, but first I want to just ask if you've tried the Feeling Great app. If you are, we'd love to get feedback comments from you, what you liked, what innovations you'd like to see. I'd also let you know that we're innovating and changing it all the time, and we now have a voice feature. So when you're working with our AI chat, you don't have to type things in anymore. It's just like kind of like talking to me. You talk to it, it talks to you. But if you've had some experiences with the Feeling Great app, write in. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. Tell me innovations you'd like to see. We're eager to hear from you and learn from you and make you a part of our development team as well. So thank you. Do you ever struggle with shyness in social situations? Do you ever have trouble getting a date? Well, in this video, you're going to learn about two jaw-dropping techniques, which are called the experimental technique and shame attacking exercises. And they're pretty mind-blowing and jaw-dropping and fun and interesting. And you're going to hear about a fellow whose life was dramatically transformed. When I was in Philadelphia, I had a clinic and I was treating, like 30, 40, 50 people a week with all kinds of emotional problems, anxiety and depression and anger and so forth. And I really loved it. And I was also developing new psychotherapy techniques at the same time. At any rate, one day this fellow came and he said his problem was excessive sweating. And this is a physiologic condition, and it's not rare. Some people just have it, and but he said he just sweated like a garden sprinkler or something like that, and he said it was really ruining his life. And he was about 30, and I don't think he'd ever had a date. And because he was convinced that if women saw him sweating, they would be disgusted. And so he tried as never to go out of his house during the daylight hours, and he would only go out at night. And he said that he used all these different deodorants and chemicals, but nothing could stop him from sweating. And one thing about him that I was very struck by, that he looked to me like he was incredibly handsome, and so it was so odd for me that he'd never had a date. And but I wasn't sure because it's hard for me to judge if a man is, attractive or not. But my daughter was working in the front office that summer as a summer job from for during our college break, and I asked her. I said, "How does this guy look to you? Is he attractive or unattractive or what?" And she says, "Dad, this guy is in the category that we call Drop-Dead Gorgeous." So I thought, okay, I got that right. So he asked me if there was any hope for him. And I said, there's a lot of hope for you, but I don't know if you'll be able to afford the fee for curing you of your social anxiety. And he says, "Is there an additional fee for that? I'm already paying you $100 an hour, doctor. How much more would it cost?" And I said, "Well, I'm not asking for more money, but I'd be asking you to confront your fears and do something that's going to take tremendous courage. And if you're willing to do that, I think we can do some pretty fantastic work. But if you're not willing to do that, then I'm probably not the guy you're looking for." And he says, "Oh, I'll do it, anything, anything you want. Just tell me what to do." And I said, "Okay, that's great. Then I want you to come in for your next appointment at 2 o'clock, and we're going to have a 2-hour appointment because that's the hottest part of the day here in Philadelphia in the summertime, and it's humid. And so that's a good time for sweaty people to sweat a lot." And so he said, "Oh, I can't wait. I'm so excited." But I don't think he realized what he was getting into. And so when he came 10 minutes early, and I said, "Now we're going to have to go outside of the hospital. My office was on the 7th floor or something of the hospital building. But I said, I have to stop by the clinical lab. We're going to be doing something called shame attacking exercises and to help you get over your fears. And so we stopped at the lab and I got a squirt bottle that they use, it's plastic and they squeeze it and then water comes out like a squirt gun for cleaning test tubes. And it has like about a pint of water in it or a quart of water or something. So I said, we're going to fill this up with water and we'll take this with us. And then he says, okay, now what are we going to do? We got out in front of the hospital and I said, well, we have to jog from here to the 7-Eleven store because it's real hot and humid right now and we have to work up a lot of sweat. So we were jogging along and he was probably thinking, this is really cool. I've never had this kind of therapy before. How is this going to help me? And suddenly we arrived at this 7-Eleven store. And I said, now here's what we're going to do. You're very sweaty. You told me you're a very sweaty guy, and I can now confirm that that's true, but you're not quite sweaty enough. And so I'm going to pour some water on your head, and I'm going to squirt you under the armpits. So you'll be just like soaked in sweat. And then what I'm going to have you do is go into the 7-Eleven store and stand next to the cash register and then hold one of your arms up like this and take your other hand and point to your armpit and announce out loud, I'm one of the sweatiest guys in Philadelphia. I sweat like a pig. Look at how sweaty I am. And he was shocked. And he says, you're got to be kidding. He says, there's no way I'm going to do something like that. And I said, there is a way you're going to do something like that. You're going to do it right now because you told me that if I agreed to treat you, you would do anything I asked you to do. And this is what I'm asking you to do. And he started arguing and insisting this is impossible and people will be shocked and he'll be totally humiliated and make a fool of himself. And finally, he said, if you think it's so easy, I'd like to see you do it. And I said, no problem. So I had him squirt my armpits and pour water on my head. And then I went inside and stood next to the cash register. And he was, peeking through the door to see what's going to happen here. And I said, look at me. I'm one of the sweatiest guys in Philadelphia. I sweat like a sprinkler. And this is the hottest and most humid time of the year. Look how sweaty I am. I'm a real sweaty person. And everyone absolutely ignored me, and they didn't seem to care at all. And they got their Slurpees, and they were paying for their drinks and stuff. And he was watching, and so then I went out and said to him, well, what do you think? And he was just dumbfounded that nobody seemed to care that I was so sweaty. So I said, now I want you to do it. So he went in and he stood next to the cash register and he put his arm up and said, look at me. I'm real sweaty too. I've sweated all my life. I'm just horribly sweaty. And the only difference was he was so handsome that people rushed up to him like he was doing a commercial or something. And they said, oh, have you tried this one? This one really works for me. And what deodorant do you recommend? And they seemed very friendly toward him. And so after, a few minutes, I said, what do you think? And he says, I can't believe that people weren't grossed out and disgusted by my sweat. And I said, let's keep checking it out. And because there was a little strip mall. And so we went from kind of store to store. And talking to people, taking turns, going up to people and saying, I'm so sweaty like this. And we started having fun with it, and nobody seemed turned off. It seemed like everyone was kind of lonely, and they thought it was funny for these two guys to come up and talk about how sweaty they were, and everyone was really, really friendly. And then the final one, we went into this boutique where they sold like really foxy clothing for fashionable young ladies. And we went in there, and I saw a really beautiful young woman giving him the eye, but he didn't notice it because he's used to filtering that out because he's so afraid, that somebody's gonna reject him or judge him. So I said, I want you to go up and do it with that young lady there. And he says, "Oh, no, no, she'd be grossed out. It'll be horrible." And I said, "There you go again, reading people's minds, thinking you know how other people feel." And that's the big key to social anxiety, by the way. You think the world is a cruel, awful place, and you never check it out. And I said, "No, I'm going to have to insist that you do that with her right now. And this is your graduation exercise. And after this, I won't ask you to do anymore, but you must do this one final shame attacking exercise." And we'll talk more about shame attacking exercises on another occasion because they're really cool, but it's one of many tools we use to treat social anxiety. You do something foolish in public and realize that the world does not, in fact, come to an end. So she went up to him and he put his hand up and started pointing to his armpit and just saying, "I'm a very sweaty guy." And she seemed to be not paying attention to what he said, but seemed very interested in him. And they started chatting, and they got into this very intense conversation. And then after 3 or 4 minutes, I could see she was extremely attracted to him, and and why not? And then she said, "Listen, I have an appointment over at the hospital, the Presbyterian Medical Center here at 3 o'clock, and I've got to leave now, so I won't be late. But do you think we should maybe get together and have a cup of coffee together or something like that at some point?" And he said, "Oh, yes, I think we definitely should." And then she said, "Well, to do that, would you need to know my name and phone number?" And he says, "Yeah, that way I could call you." And she said, "Well, I'm going to write it here. Here's my name, and this is my phone number." And then she folded the piece of paper and placed it in the palm of his hand, and then folded his fingers over it and said, "Now, don't you lose that, and I'll be waiting for your call." And he couldn't believe it. And it was the end of a lifetime of severe isolation, loneliness, and social anxiety. And he did it by changing the way he was thinking and by doing something called the experimental technique, to do an experiment to find out, is the world the way we think it is? Are our negative thoughts as real as they are? But there was a price to be paid because it took tremendous courage for him to confront his fear. And if you struggle with anxiety and fears, it may take some courage on your part as well. But I just love treating anxiety. To tell you the truth, I've personally had a good 17 anxiety disorders. When I wrote my book on anxiety called When Panic Attacks, I started noticing, wow, I've had so many forms of anxiety myself. I've had horrible public speaking anxiety. I've had a crippling fear of cameras. I had a fear of dogs, horses, bees, blood, heights, vomiting. The list goes on and on. So when someone comes to me and social anxiety, I've had incredibly intense public speaking anxiety. So when someone comes to me with anxiety, I say, "Oh man, this is going to be great because I've had what you have. And I know how crappy that is. And I've got the tools to show you how to beat that thing, and what a joy that's going to be." And my patients, I think, love that because they like hearing that the great Dr. Burns is actually pretty damn human and flawed, but also that I've experienced what you've experienced. I've experienced horrible depression. I've experienced panic, intense anxiety, and I have learned how to turn those things around, and I'd love to do that for you as well. If you're interested in learning more, you can check the link to our Feeling Great app and see what you think. And if you like it, you might want to subscribe. If you don't like it, no problem. You checked it out. But if you like it and want to subscribe, but think, well, God, I don't have enough money, I'm a student or something like that, just contact us and we'll give it to you for free. So that's the story of the sweaty guy, and I'll never forget him. The only problem for me is, I've spent the last 40 years developing techniques that work super fast. When I see people now, what I used to be able to do like in a few sessions or 10 or 12 sessions, and now I can usually, make these changes happen in a single session, kind of like what I did with him. But the only problem is about the time I get to know people and really like them and connect with them, they get well on me, and then I never see them again. I always tell them, I hope you relapse so you can come back for a tune-up, because if you don't, I'll never see you again. But most of mine, I never see them again. And when you connect with someone on such a deep level, I really develop such love and respect for my patients, and it's sad when I lose them, and I lose them all the time now, but I wouldn't have it any other way.